Cynthia Pelayo. Join me this week on One Final Twist.
I'm Saratoga Schaefer. Join me this week on One Final Twist.
This is James Markert. Join me this week on One Final Twist.
Today on One Final Twist, we're joined by Cynthia Pelayo, one of today's most compelling voices in dark fiction, a Bram Stoker Award winner and master of urban horror. Pelayo's work fuses folklore, true crime, and poetic dread. Her novels, Children of Chicago, The Shoemaker's Magician, and Forgotten Sister, showcases her signature blend of myth and murder set against a stark emotional landscape. Pelayo's storytelling is fearless, elegant, and deeply rooted in the Gothic pulse of real city life. We're excited to dive into her inspirations, her research, and the haunting threads that connect her body of work. Next, we have James Markert, who also writes as J.H. Markert, an award-winning novelist known for blending history, suspense, and sometimes thriller horror with a touch of supernatural. And from Kentucky, just got to do that little part there too. His work often explores the thin line between the past and the present, grounding emotional, character-driven stories in richly atmospheric settings. From The Angel Maker to The Nightmare Man in his most recent release, Spider to the Fly, Markert delivers deeply human fiction wrapped in mystery and tension. We're thrilled to talk to him about his storytelling process, his fascination with hidden history, and the themes that keep pulling readers into his world. Finally, we're joined by Saratoga Schaefer, a rising powerhouse in the thriller world whose fiction delivers razor-sharp tension and morally tangled characters. Saratoga's book, Serial Killer Support Group, made an immediate impact, leaving readers begging to read what is next. Schaefer's work sits at the perfect intersection of gripping suspense and emotional depth. We cannot wait to talk with Saratoga about crafting high-stakes narratives, building flawed but compelling protagonists, and what readers can expect next.
Can you all just give us a little background on what drew you to this moment in your life to write? A little bit about your careers, and we'll start with Cynthia.
So I was a journalist for some time, and then I couldn't pay my bills as a journalist, and I eventually worked in marketing research, and I did that for 2 decades. I was really good at it. I worked in a fancy office. Was a corporate consultant, but I was miserable and I missed writing. And so I had written like poetry and short stories, but it was around like 2019 that I told myself I need to make this my life and I need to just figure out how. And it's gonna be very different than the way my life looks right now. And it was around that time that I just really started treating it like a second job. Like I would be done with my day job, I had to come home and I would just say, this is my next job. And I would treat it as such. And it was over the course of a few years that I felt like I was able to learn more, grow more. And then I got laid off from my day job. And nothing says you are a full-time writer than now you've gotten laid off. And so uh, it just it just worked out. And so now this is what I do for a living.
Yeah, I have been writing in some capacity since I was a kid. Definitely any kind of fiction. I think I wrote my first short story when I was in like second grade, and it was about a murderous nutcracker. So that theme of like death has always been in my work. But for the past decade plus, I've also been working full time. I have worked in marketing, event design, social media. I'm a publicist right now for classical musicians. So I, very like Cynthia, I treat this as my second job. I have done a ton of different stuff, which has been really helpful in actually informing my own writing career because I have a little bit of insight into the opposite end of it. So the marketing, the sales, the PR, which is helpful to be an author because it's all well and good to just write the book and then you get the book published and people are like, great, now go market it for yourself. So that has always been helpful to have that information in my past career as well. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of all come together, and I worked for a very long time to get published, and Serial Killer Support Group was my seventh novel. So it took a while. I was in the I was in the trenches there for a bit. So it's very exciting to finally kind of see all the hard work start to pay off.
Um, but like most authors, it was a journey, and I think every author has a different kind of journey. Um, I think up until my junior year of high school, I read art, decided to bag all the classics and let us read Stephen King all year. And that's when I developed the love for reading, and eventually in college, a love for writing. And then I spent 13 years and three and a half novels of horror suspense that never sold, never found an agent until I decided to write my first historical novel. And that one sold, which was my fourth book. So then I spent 10 years writing historical fiction. And when I didn't have another book on contract, I decided to go back and write something a little scarier, a little more creepy. And that's when I wrote The Nightmare Man. So then I've been writing under JH ever since. And then just sold my newest historical, which will be my first in 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So did a little bit of both, and just been doing tennis pro for 26 years and then writing full time for the last 5.
Oh, wow. Can each of you all tell us a little bit about your current novel that's about to be published? I think each of you have one coming in the next few weeks to months. We'll start with you, James, on that one.
My next one is coming out March 24th, 2026. It's called Dig. It takes place on a fictional island off the coast of Savannah. Involves a tragedy, axe murders from years past, and then the son moves back to Crow Island to bury his father, and sees that everyone on the island is digging, literally digging into the ground, and also digging into each other's business. And chaos ensues from there, and it has a lot to do with the honey being made on the island.
Saratoga.
Yeah, my next book is Tradwife, and it's coming out February 10th, 2026. So getting there, should be out shortly, which is exciting. And it's about a Tradwife influencer who is desperate to have a baby. So she enlists the help of a creature she finds in her well and falls pregnant with a very hungry, very demonic child.
Cynthia.
It Came from Neverland is not so much a Peter Pan retelling, but it's a continuation of the story. It is my first time writing historical and first time writing outside of the city of Chicago, so it's been a big of a shift for me. And it follows Wendy Darling, who works at an orphanage in 1914 at the beginning of World War One. And little by little, her students start going missing, and Peter Pan is back. And he is not the lovely, charming boy from the fairy tales. And even if you read J.M. Barrie's original, he's quite a cruel young boy. And so she has to stop him before he takes her back and the rest of her children.
Cynthia, I wanted to say welcome to Crooked Lane.
Yeah, thank you.
This is for each of you too. Which part of your writing process or routine would surprise readers the most?
I think what surprises people the most is that two things. I think there is, and it's kind of like adjacent to writing. People think that, oh, once you become a full-time writer, it's gonna be so much better. I've never worked harder than I have in my entire life. Many nights I just kind of will write until I literally pass out on my sofa. So you do work a lot and you're always working. And I think the other aspect of it is to be a full-time writer, or even to be a writer, it's it kind of consumes my life, I know at least. So I am always writing. It incorporates and it seeps into every aspect of my life to the point that my family knows if we're going on a road trip, mom's gonna have her notebook, she's gonna have an iPad, she's gonna be writing, she's gonna be recording things. And so it's just all a part of my life.
I would say one thing that might surprise readers is that I tend to work very quickly. I tend to draft within a month, which is kind of insane. But I have like ADHD and a couple other like neurodivergent things going on. And if I don't do it quickly, I will lose interest and it will never get done. So I try to get all of my ideas out at once, get them on the page, and then I can deal with whatever mess it looks like later. But the drafting process for me is usually super intense, and involves me getting up at 5 or 6 in the morning, writing nonstop for 3 hours, and then jumping right into my day job. So it's a very ridiculous process that I try to replicate 2 to 3 times a year, which means I have kind of a backlog of ideas and manuscripts. So, for example, in 2026, I have 3 books coming out, which is nuts, but it's because that's how my drafting process works. So I end up with quite a lot to play with over the course of a year, which is nice, but can be extremely taxing on me physically and emotionally. So in the future, maybe I need to find another way to operate, but for now it's working.
I'm a little similar there, but I also had 3 books coming out next year, which would make you think that I write nonstop. But when I do write, it's pretty intense. And I usually go at it from like 8 o'clock until 2. Because I get dumber as the day goes on, and my writing would be really, really poor around late afternoon to the evening. But when I finish a book, I might go 2-3 weeks without writing, just because I need to separate that and I do a lot of thinking in that time, because I believe it or not, when what we do, thinking is working, because you have to think. You have to give yourself time to think. Maybe the most surprising thing would be I don't know how to type. So I don't use the home keys. I use 2 fingers. So that's probably the most surprising thing, I would think.
You have a pretty interesting story too about Spider to the Fly, because it came about totally unexpected, right?
Well, it's one of those things where I'd given my publisher 2 stories. One was Dig, that was the first draft was finished, and the other one was Spider to the Fly, which was just a paragraph. And they thought that Spider to the Fly was going to be a better follow-up to Sleep Tight. And they want that one first, and I don't have anything. Said, can you get it done by October? And I said, I'll give it a try. And luckily it was a book that flowed pretty well, and I was able to write it pretty quickly.
It doesn't seem like it was a rushed at all as far as the storyline, the plot. Turned out really good.
Or maybe I'd been thinking about it longer than I thought. I don't know.
Are you all, is everybody, are you working on your next project? I know, Saratoga, you said you've got 3 coming out in 2026. James has got a couple. What about you, Cynthia?
I released 5 books in 2025, and so I'm really burned out, in the best way. But I'm releasing this in June, and I finished editing an anthology with Simon and Schuster that includes Mariana Enriquez, Agustina Bastarrica, Isabel Cañas, in which it's a Latin American horror anthology. So that will be out in October. So those are the 2 things that I'm working on.
Saratoga, I just know of 2 next year. What's the third one?
So I have Tradwife coming out in February. I have The Last Time We Drowned, which is a thriller, coming out in June. And then I have A Thousand Monstrous Forms, which is another horror, coming out in the fall.
That's the one I didn't find. When I was getting ready for this, I didn't see that one.
I didn't see that one
Yeah.
either. No.
Yeah, we just announced it like a couple weeks ago, so we don't even have like a firm like pub date yet, but I just finished up the first round of dev edits for that one, so it's in the pipeline.
I have a question. I'm popping in here.
Go ahead.
All three of you blend genres. So do you enjoy like, or do you like that? I so when as a horror reader too, I feel like you have more leeway with the truth or with the facts. So do you like blending that supernatural horror element in there with thrillers, or do you find it difficult, or kind of tell me how you like blending those?
I don't consider myself so much of a like a traditional horror author. I feel like I do really straddle like literary thriller or crime and with horror, but for me horror elements just psychologically, at least for me, it helps me tell the stories that I want to tell in a much easier way because I at least create some psychic distance between the really bad thing. Usually, the books that I write have some true crime element to it. Um, I guess the true crime, there is like no true crime element, and it came from Neverland, but there is just like the actual horror of World War I and watching that unfold and learning that so many, it was like young, not just like young men, but like boys snuck in to join, the war effort. And it was like the first time that there was mechanized war and trench warfare. And so just being able to deal with all of those horrific things and I can weave in the supernatural to kind of create that distance helps me.
Yeah, I think I started out mostly in straight up thriller, and learning kind of how to make things that are on its face unbelievable believable to a reader. And then I started to play around a little bit more and start to write the stuff that really interested me and things that maybe are a little less believable. And that's when the horror started to seep in a little bit. Serial Killer Support Group is a thriller. I think I say that if you squint, it's kind of a horror too, because it's got kind of that like slasher serial killer vibe going on, but it's supposed to be rooted in, a normal New York City. There's not giant monsters running around or anything like that. And then when I started to play more with horror and was able to dive fully into something that doesn't necessarily have to be rooted in reality, I found a lot of freedom from that. And that sort of informed my writing moving forward of playing with different genres and bending some of the rules and mixing things. And now I kind of feel like it's very fluid and I'm giving myself permission to play with different genres and see what happens and not have to keep myself in a box, because I feel like when I started writing, I was very much like, you must be in one genre and only stay in that genre. And now I'm like, I'm going to write whatever the hell I want. And it's been very freeing and fun. So I am always down to bring a little bit of different genre tropes or themes into anything I write. And that's also why I read across different genres. I'm like really not a romance person at all, but I do read several romance books a year just so I can get like the sense of how they're written and the beats and all of that, because I think that can be really helpful in informing your own writing. And in fact, Trad Wife kind of has this romance subplot, which is not the kind you would find in a traditional romance book, but works for the horror. So I think in that way it's fun to play around and see how you can blend things.
Um, I don't even know if I consider myself a horror author, although I love horror. I I write so many different things, and one thing that got in a little bit of trouble when I wrote historical fiction is that I had three of those books that drifted into magical realism, which for me was like horror light. Um, but so I don't go into any story knowing exactly what it's going to be, whether it's going to be straight up horror or thriller, suspense. I just write whatever story comes to me, and let it fall where it may. I am a little bit more aware now that if I've if I have a thriller suspense, I'm going to try to keep it rooted in the real world. Um, and if I have a horror novel that can go supernatural, you're going to know sooner than later. Um, what I what I'm aware of not doing is, have a thriller suspense rooted in the real world, and then 70% of it something supernatural happens. So I've learned to put at least that into some sort of category. But even in thriller suspense, I like to have horror elements. I don't know if I do it on purpose. It just drifts towards that. But I think any type of book that has something horrifying to the reader could be considered horror. Like Spider to the Fly. I don't think it's a horror novel, but if you're scared of spiders, maybe it is. It all depends on what frightens the reader.
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you, I messaged Scott last night and I said, I'm trying to finish Dig, but I'm afraid. So I've got to wait till it gets daylight or I'm going to paint my porch blue. So,
And I had passed my wife, trad wife, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not reading this at all." And she likes a good horror, but she's like, "This is just, ooh, it scares me." She said, "I'm not reading this." So, Saratoga, where did you come up with the idea of a support group for serial killers? And when I got that book, I was like, ah. And then I started, and man, there's some funny stuff in it, but it is really a really good book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I got the idea when I lived in Wisconsin. I lived in Milwaukee for 5 years, and I wrote this in 2022, which was my last year living there. And I had gone through a bunch of like very traumatic personal stuff and was like, I need something new. I'm going to move. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And this was kind of what I wrote during that time. And the idea came from a book I was reading at the time, which I can't remember the title of now, but they had this kind of throwaway line about how there is no such thing as a support group for murderers. And that sort of stuck in my head for a couple weeks. And I started thinking about what a support group for serial killers specifically would look like and what it would take to have someone from the outside be able to infiltrate that group and be able to see essentially the mindset of a serial killer from the inside. I tend to be a very high concept writer, so I start with the idea and then I have to dig a little deeper and figure out who the characters are and what's happening in this book. So I started with that overarching idea and theme and kind of went from there and ended up with something that is, I think, very fun and absurd and exciting. And yeah, I think it was just like a kind of tumultuous period of my life. So I put all of that into the book in different types of ways. And it was really cool to see that all come to fruition a couple years after.
Gotcha.
Cynthia, I've got a question for you. So the Children of Chicago and the poetry and the grim fairy tales and all of that. How fun was that researching the and stretching what you learned for that story for that one?
I love getting lost in the research. I usually get in trouble, and I get asked to remove some things because, like in one book, Forgotten Sisters, for example, I had like 30 pages of just like I went on a tangent about the Titanic, and they were just like, "This is a 30, it's great, but it's a 30-page tangent." And I did something similar in Children of Chicago where I went on this long tangent about the Pied Piper and how there is a plaque talking about that individual and how, the folklore about a number of children being led away from a town and that they were used as like casualties in war, like many hundreds of years ago. And so I'm completely fascinated with all things folk stories, urban legends, and just to kind of see how those stories just continue or get told and retold or how they morph. So that was interesting and fun to do.
JH, you write under a pen name with JH, and then in your historical, you write as James. How do you decide from the moment you have an idea that you're going to go historical, suspense thriller, into the horror genre a little bit? How do you decide that?
But right now, the publishing world decides it. The ever since the Nightmare Man and the success of those books, that's pretty much all I've been doing. And then off and on, I was working on my latest historical, Ransom Burning, which I think will come out December 2026. But I have probably, well, all authors have several ideas and partially started books. I have several historicals that are in idea form or first 30, 40, 50 pages that I'm eager to get back to. Um, so it's more of a what do I have permission to write next or kind of thing. Because I know even before I start it whether it's going to be historical or thriller or whatever. But I do look forward to getting back to doing both.
Yeah. Do you plan to get into the world of Sleep Tight again with the main the female protagonist in that one?
That's one where I left open just in case, but I didn't have a second story yet. Now the Nightmare Man, Mr. Lullaby, on both of those, I have sequels ideas for. Um, and but Sleep Tight, I left it open in case one came to me, which I don't think would be hard to do. But I had nothing concrete.
So this question is for all three of you, and we've not asked this question yet to anybody. So Saratoga, we'll start with you. The audiobook process for you guys, how do you feel about number one, hearing your book, in the audio world? Tell us kind of the experience of picking your narrator, what you go through and how that works.
Yeah, my audiobook experience for both Serial Killer Support Group and Tradwife has been great. Spotify is the one who got the rights for both of those books, and picking out the narrator was kind of an easy process. They sent me two different options, and then I listened. They would give a little sample of the narrator reading a page or so from the book, and then I would do a little research about the different types of books that the narrator has done before, and then I would pick based on that. I am not an audiobook person. I find them very challenging. I don't know if that's because I have like a misophonia thing where certain voices just don't work well with my head and I can't have them in my head talking to me, or if it's just because I just like the physical book. But I will say that after reading Serial Killer Support Group like 60 times over a 6 month period, I was so sick and tired of it. I never ever wanted to read this book ever again. And then when the audiobook came out, I listened to it and it actually helped me fall back in love with my own book, which was great because I was really done with it forever. So I will say that was a very lovely part of that experience. But yeah, it's been super interesting and I'm excited to see what's done with Tradwife when it's totally finished. But it was a really cool experience, and especially with Serial Killer Support Group, they added in an additional narrator because there are these interlude chapters from the serial killer's points of view, and I kind of thought it would be better to have a male's voice for that, and I also was not very comfortable with the white woman we had employed to do Cyrus' voice doing an accented voice for like a Latino guy. So I advocated that we hired a Latino voice actor for that, which was they were all on board for, and that was awesome too. So I had a really, really great experience with the audiobook situation. And even though I'm not an audiobook reader myself, I think it's excellent, and I think it's great to have another version of accessibility for readers who maybe can't or don't have the ability to have a physical copy.
I love audiobooks, but it wasn't until recently. Um, but it's a way to get more books and stories into my brain when I don't have time as much time to read as much as I would like. Um, but similar to Saratoga, because my last book or two has been with Spotify. Um, you know, they'll give you options on narrators, and we'll pick one, and whether they're going with what we pick, or they were going to pick that, I don't know. Um, but I had several books with Dreamscape, and it's a very similar process. It seems like Spotify might be more willing to go more than one or two narrators. Spider to the Fly had three. Um, One thing with audiobooks that I've noticed, and I will listen to mine, but not all the way through, just because I know how it goes. I'll get an idea for it. But in listening to some of mine, I've realized in my writing how some things don't work as well on audio, and I will take that out of my writing, knowing that, and I don't. This is kind of lame, but I don't have an exact example of that. I just know there's been a few instances where I listen to mine and I'm like, I'm going to change how I do that, just because it works better on audio. Um, but other than that, I've had great experiences with the audiobooks.
I don't listen to my audiobooks either. I will listen to the auditions, and so um I like that experience, but like Saratoga, audiobooks, I've tried so many and it just never clicks. But that's for fiction. I can listen to like nonfiction and audiobooks, and I do. I listen to tons and tons of nonfiction in audiobook format. But when it comes to fiction, I can't get lost in a fictional audiobook. But I will listen to nonstop nonfiction audiobooks. But it's an interesting experience. I wish I could listen to them. My husband like puts it like at two, like the speed, and we'll just like tear through tons of them. And I'm like, I wish I could do that. Um, but yeah, I need to read it.
How can our listeners and viewers that want to connect with you via social media, how can they do that? What are your handles? We'll start with Cynthia.
I'm on Instagram at Cynthia Pelayo author. I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads, but in the new year, I'm going to be pulling back from those and trying to focus on just like my website. And right now, my newsletter's on Substack, and so trying to focus on those types of mediums where I can write more thoughtful things and then like pair it with images.
Saratoga.
Yeah, I can be found at Saratoga is here on pretty much almost everything. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky Threads, TikTok. My Twitter's kind of defunct because I don't need to be on there. But similar to Cynthia, I'm going to be trying to pull back from some of these. It's just a lot of social media all the time when you're an author.
Mhm.
But I'm most active on Instagram and sometimes Threads. So if people want to connect with me, they're always welcome to do so on one of those.
James.
I'm on all of them, but not really. My main one is Instagram, which is James Markert 74. I'm on Facebook as well. I have my own personal account and author page, but I don't remember which is which. I think we're James Markert author. I don't know. Just there's two of them, but main one is Instagram. I've just found that, I mean, I'm on Blue Sky, Threads, all of it. It's too much. And I think I could be better at building one than trying to build all of them. So Instagram's the main one.
Do any of you all have a indie bookstore or a website that people can get signed copies of your books that or book plates, something like that? James.
Yeah, Carmichael's bookstore in Louisville. There's two of them. Um, I do that often, where if somebody wants to order a book from there and leave a note to have it personalized, and I'll drive over and sign it.
Okay. Saratoga.
Yeah, if anyone pre-orders Tradwife from any retailer and you send Crooked Lane a receipt, just send it to marketing@crookedlanebooks.com and you will get a signed book plate and a very cool sticker sheet. And that is from any retailer. But if you would like a physical, yes, those are the stickers. If you would like a physical, personalized signed copy of Tradwife as well, you can order one from Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs. I'm partnered with them for a pre-order campaign. So if you order directly from them, I will physically sign your book and personalize it.
Okay. Cynthia?
My preferred bookstore in Chicago is Exile and Bookville. Their website is EXILEIN book, VILLE.com, and they generally always have my books on hand and signed.
I kind of have a fun question for each of you too. If you could sit down with any author or a character from your favorite book, who would it be? Cynthia? I see the wheels turning on that one.
Mhm.
Any author or any character from
Yeah.
my favorite book. I would just love to have tea one afternoon and gossip with Shirley Jackson.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I feel like I would have to go with one of the authors of my youth and have a chat with Philip Pullman, because his Dark Material series was extremely instrumental to me when I was younger, and is still The Golden Compass is still my favorite book. So I think just for the sort of nostalgia factor and getting me into reading and writing, I think I would have to have a little chit chat about Killing God with him.
This is tough. Stephen King's always been my hero. But I think I'd like to have a beer with John Irving.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what we talk about, but
Do either of you all have anything in the works for the screen? Movies, book, or series, anything like that going on?
Nothing exciting on my end.
Nothing I can discuss.
Ah,
Oh,
it's nothing as of now with my books. Um, but I have a couple screenplays that I've written that are out there, and just keeping your fingers crossed.
I do. Teresa?
I'm good. I've asked everything. I could talk all day. I have to monitor myself.
She does. She just, whoo, she goes. I would like to say, I want to say thank you to uh, Dulcie and Michaela at Crooked Lane for getting this together. And each of you, thank you for taking an hour or so out of your day to talk with us. It was great, and we look forward to all of your new books.
Thank you all so much. It was nice chatting with you, James, in Saratoga.
I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.